Amazing rescue. U.S. Marine and K-9 exposed a hidden genius, transforming a life forever. Jake Thompson stood at the entrance of the local elementary school, every step forward a reminder of the countless lives he had fought for overseas. But in that moment, he felt utterly hollow. The echoes of gunfire and the faces of fallen comrades surged in his mind. Beside him, Max, his loyal K-9 partner, sensed his unease. The comforting weight of the dog's warm presence anchored him, even as his heart raced with uncertainty. He often questioned himself, would this return to his small Midwestern hometown truly lead to healing, or was it just another battlefield cloaked in the mundane? As he entered the classroom, he was struck by the sight of Emily, the passionate science teacher, her lively spirit filling the space with sharp laughter that seemed to rise above the mundane chatter of pencil and paper. She moved with an infectious enthusiasm, igniting an undeniable spark in her students' eyes with innovative lesson plans that, in Jake's opinion, deserved to be celebrated. Yet, he sensed an underlying current of her frustrations, the budget cuts, the undervaluation of creative teaching. Watching her bring the subject to life, he felt a flicker of a kinship. Yes, she was fighting for recognition, just as he had fought for an elusive sense of purpose in every tour he endured. Approaching her after class, he felt an unexpected wave of admiration mixed with the intoxicating fear of overstepping. "You're amazing," he finally said. The earnestness in her eyes as she looked up at him brought a rare smile to his face. And thus began a friendship between two wounded souls, weaving in dreams and mutual support. But as they collaborated, an internal storm brewed within Jake. He felt caught between the legacy of his family, their relentless toil at the factory, and the desire to embrace something as unconventional as Emily's vision. Could he betray the roots of his upbringing for a cause he believed was important? Or was he destined to retread the paths of those before him? Moments swirled in his mind. The hard work, the plaques on the wall, his father's disappointed look when he left for the Marines. Each memory sparked a weighty tension in Jake's chest, squeezing tighter with every shared moment he spent with Emily. Was he abandoning his family's honor for a fleeting connection, or was this his chance to embrace a new purpose? He questioned if Emily's dream could truly blossom, or if it would eventually be stifled like so many before her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the days passed, Jake learned that a powerful corporate entity was targeting the school, pushing for a creative chokehold under the guise of progress. Emily's innovative ideas, the very lifeblood of her career, were now on the line. He felt the urgency of her plight gnawing in his gut. Could he piece together the courage that had once pushed him into chaotic battles, now as he faced a different foe? Standing shoulder to shoulder with Emily, he was filled with both determination and dread. His heart raced with the thought of risking his family's legacy for her dream. What if this battle forged a future he truly believed in? Could he step beyond the shadow of his past, or would he choose the familiar comfort of conformity over the fear of failure? As the stakes rose, so did the anguish within him, teetering on the edge of revelation. The true measure of heroism faced him, a choice that threatened to unravel everything. And he was poised at a crossroads, powerless in the face of his own discontent. Jake's resolve fractured under the weight of uncertainty. Days filled with meetings and frantic discussions with Emily had morphed into sleepless nights spent wrestling with memories of combat zones and the notion of home. He paced the living room of his childhood home, Max lying in a corner, alert but relaxed. The soft ticking of the wall clock echoed the seconds as they slipped through his fingers, each beat a reminder of the time passing and the endless cycle of decision-making he faced. Every day at the school felt like a skirmish, a series of small confrontations against a relentless adversary. Jake immersed himself in Emily's world, the classroom becoming a sanctuary where shared visions flourished amidst crumbling expectations. They brainstormed, conceived new ideas, and rallied for support, yet every time enthusiasm surged, shadows of doubt loomed larger. "Jake," Emily said one afternoon, her voice slicing through his haze, "we need to confront the board. This isn't just about funding, it's about imagination. Our students deserve better." Her urgency mirrored his own, and for a moment he felt invincible, fueled by their collective vision for change. But as they prepared their presentation, the doubts crept back in. He pictured the board members' skeptical faces, dismissive smiles, and words like practicality and tradition. Jake felt that familiar tightening in his chest, the fear of failure that had haunted him in war but now twisted into a different form, an emotional abandonment of familial duty. His internal conflict deepened as he delved deeper into Emily's world. He discovered the nuances of classroom management, the profound impact of engaging lessons, and the relentless pushback from a system resistant to change. Each new insight propelled his admiration for her further, yet it also made him question his own worthiness. Was he simply a soldier striving for recognition in a battlefield of education? Could he be a steady hand guiding the unsettling tides of change? Setting aside self-doubt, Jake began embracing the role of an advocate. He pushed himself to articulate ideas in meetings, armed with newfound perspectives from observing Emily interact with her students. The first time he stood before the board to present, a sudden surge of adrenaline coursed through him. He spoke with a clarity that surprised even himself, weaving Emily's vision with his experiences, drawing parallels between the discipline of the military and the nurturing required in education. He could see their eyes narrow, the uncertainty ebbing away, replaced by intrigue. As they faced resistance, Jake clung to Emily's fervor like a lifeline. Her passion was infectious, drawing him closer to an awakening he had not anticipated. He questioned whether this venture was truly about Emily, or if it was a new path he could carve for himself, a fight that would help redefine his existence far removed from the reluctance nagging at his core. After one particularly grueling meeting, Emily looked at him, a mixture of worry and hope radiating from her eyes. "Are you with me on this? I know it seems daunting." Her voice trailed off, fear of losing him mingling with the potential of what they could achieve together. With every fiber of his being, Jake understood the challenge. The board was just the beginning. Compounding frustrations stirred a fire within him. The ghosts of his past were beginning to fade, making room for a warrior willing to fight not with weapons, but with words and passion. It was time to steel himself against the looming threat, but also to embrace the potential for growth and change. The decisions he faced weren't just about Emily's vision anymore. They were about his own quest for purpose, the fight against conformity and complacency. Taking a deep breath, he replied, "I'm in, but we need a strategy. We need to show them what we stand for." As realization dawned, a new worldview crystallized. The battle ahead was physical, but the key to victory lay in the resilience they both could harness. They were more than teacher and ex-Marine. They were allies on an uncharted battlefield, determined to stave off a corporate incursion. Jake stood at the edge of a new frontier, yet the specter of doubt still lingered. What if this journey ended in failure? What if the ghosts of his past emerged to haunt him with the echo of a familiar, crippling fear? The stakes were monumental, and as they set out on this daring mission, they forged a path that tested the very core of who he was meant to be. But more challenges awaited. Just as he began to formulate a plan, another revelation knocked fiercely at the door of his consciousness. What if the corporate entity had power beyond his comprehension? What if they had some dirt on the board that could derail everything he and Emily were working towards? He could feel the tension building, setting the tone for what lay ahead. Jake shuffled papers on the table, a mix of stale coffee and lingering anxiety swirling around him. The wall clock ticked on, but for him, time felt suspended, a paradox of urgency and stagnation. He stared at the presentation they had been crafting meticulously. It had to be perfect, yet right now, it felt like just another brick in the wall of resistance they were trying to break down. "Jake, are you listening?" Emily's voice broke through his reverie, her eyes searching his. He nodded, but doubt clawed at him. "We have to present next week. We need to convince them, Not just with statistics, but with passion. The light in her expression ignited something inside him, but it was hard to stoke that flame when everything he'd known, his comfort zones, his identity, felt on the verge of collapse. He leaned forward, fingers interlaced, as if seeking refuge in the solidity of the table. What if they don't see it? What if we're just two dreamers spinning stories? The vulnerabilities flashed through him, an overwhelming tide. Emily shook her head, resolute. Then we changed the narrative. We've faced bigger obstacles, haven't we? Think of battles, Jake. Not every mission was a straight path. He couldn't help but recall the moments when split-second decisions meant life or death. But this was different. It was a battle for purpose, for a life away from the shadowy echoes of his past. With a deep breath, he redirected the conversation. We need to show what's at stake. Show them the lives we can change. The realization sparked something within him, to rely on his experiences and insights to create a compelling message. The military had taught him the art of strategy, of mobilizing resources creatively, all of which carried weight now. As they worked late into the evening, Jake allowed himself to open up, sharing memories from his time in service that mirrored their vision. A bond that could forge connection. Emily listened intently, her respect bolstering his confidence. As he spoke, he realized he was externalizing thoughts that had long been trapped. Perhaps for the first time, his scars were transforming into tools for advocacy, rather than symbols of defeat. But lurking behind his passion was the gnawing fear of inadequacy. Each story revealed a piece of him that felt unworthy. Could he truly impact education, an arena so foreign compared to the battlegrounds he knew? As he prepared for their first full mock presentation, Jake turned introspective, questioning the strength of his resolve. In the midst of several rehearsals, a thought occurred to him, a hidden competency he had scarcely acknowledged. He had survived intense conditions, led men in chaos, and now he could lead change. Maybe leveraging that insight could convince the board that they weren't just fighting for resources. They were fighting to build resilient futures for their students. Jake, focus, Emily urged, breaking into his thoughts again. What you shared about your experiences, it's powerful. You know how effective communication can be a tool for transformation. Use that strength. He nodded, her belief in him threading into his resolve, sewing it together with a stubborn thread of hope. Now a lurking doubt shifted into a hardened determination. He visualized standing before the board, uncomfortably familiar, yet invigorating, a chance to reinvigorate his sense of duty, but in a completely new realm. Yet as the day approached, Jake knew they would inevitably face an unforgiving opponent, the corporate entity behind the board. The earlier revelation threatened to strangle his aspirations. What leverage and secrets did they possess that could undermine their efforts? With a storm brewing in the distance, lurking threats echoed back to his combat days. Instincts sharpened by every tense moment filled his mind. This time, though, the mission wasn't about defense. It was about being proactive in asserting their vision for education. As Jake squared his shoulders, he could feel the weight of the moment ahead press into his bones, a step toward reshaping not only the education landscape, but also remapping his identity. Now, every bit of him was aligned in preparation for the confrontation. But beneath that surface of resolve, a dark question loomed like thunderclouds ready to burst. How far would he need to go to reveal the truth? Stepping away from his desk, Jake glanced at Emily, who was immersed in her notes, the fire in her spirit illuminating their path ahead. The stakes were higher than ever. If he was willing to unearth hidden truths, could he muster the courage required to face the ramifications? Their mission promised transformation, and yet the potential for personal annihilation lingered, waiting just beyond their grasp. Jake awoke the next morning with a tightness in his chest, the kind that carried the weight of unrealized potential. He rolled out of bed and stood at the window, the morning sun fighting through clouds, illuminating a world on the cusp of change. He felt an echo of the past. Each dawn had once signaled another mission, another chance to rise against the tides of adversity. Today was no different, except this battle wasn't about survival in combat. It was about survival in a world that he was still learning to navigate. His hands curled into fists as he recalled Emily's words from the night before. He needed to channel that confidence, that belief in their purpose. But how could he transform years of training on the battlefield into a vision for the future of education? The realization that his military experience could be a framework, not a limitation, sent a surge through him. He could lead again. He could influence change. The truth settled deeper as he got dressed, a flicker of a plan igniting. Jake could seize the narrative. He needed to make their presentation a testament to the power of resilience, both in students and in himself. A raw authenticity would resonate far beyond numbers. He grabbed a notebook and began drafting new ideas, weaving his experiences into a cohesive message of empowerment based on his insights about strength and vulnerability. At the office, the atmosphere had changed slightly. Emily was already dissecting slides, her determination infectious. They exchanged a glance. Something unspoken passed between them. This was their moment to create ripples and possibly waves. He approached her, rested a hand on the table, and proposed, "What if we shift the focus from just statistics to the stories behind them? We not only present data, but also the realities that those numbers represent." Emily's eyes lit up with understanding. "Absolutely. We can blend your stories with the statistics to illustrate a cohesive and human narrative. It's about showing the board the tangible impact." As they collaborated, Jake proposed portraying a few key student stories, individuals who had faced tremendous challenges and emerged, much like he had. Through these narratives, they could position their plan not just as an initiative, but a lifeline. However, amid these invigorating ideas, insecurities crept back in. What if the board couldn't see beyond the polished slides? What if their plan was met with the same indifference he had faced when he first returned from service? But instead of hiding from those uncertainties, Jake made a conscious choice to confront them. "Emily, let's anticipate their objections. We need an arsenal of counterpoints, data that reinforces our narrative," he proposed, firming his resolve. In this call to action, he found clarity. He could approach the board like he once approached a strategic command, armed not only with insight but with conviction. The conviction that every student deserved a fighting chance. Days went by, and with mock presentation day looming, preparations intensified. On the surface, he appeared calm, but internally, a tempest raged. Jake spent sleepless nights thinking of potential questions and preparing for a barrage of scrutiny. What would they ask? Were they interested in their vision, or only concerned with profit margins? The morning of the presentation dawned, and Jake felt himself oscillating between excitement and gut-wrenching anxiety. As he stood before the mirror adjusting his tie, he whispered to himself a mantra: "Who I was cannot dictate who I will become." He was stepping into a future not defined by his past but by his actions today. Just before leaving for the meeting, Emily caught his eye once more. "We've got this, Jake," she said, leveling him with a warm smile that infused his resolve with certainty. Walking into the sleek boardroom, everything felt too polished, too sterile. The faces around the table were expectant, each one loaded with authority. But beneath that veneer of structured power, he sensed a vulnerability in the air, a silent accord they all shared about the state of education. Jake inhaled deeply, letting the air fill him with courage. It was more than a presentation. It was an awakening. Just as he was about to speak, the door swung open. A figure entered. The board's head strategist simmered with palpable disdain. "I hope you're ready to be challenged," she said, sliding into her seat. And with those words, Jake felt the storm he had anticipated brewing, washing over him like waves crashing against an unyielding shore. Would he sink or swim? The moment of truth had arrived. As Jake stood at the front of the boardroom, a fire ignited within him, fueled by the disdainful gaze of the board's head strategist. Her words loomed, heavy with the implication that every ounce of doubt he had secretly harbored was about to be unearthed for inspection. But Jake had reached a pivotal moment. He could either buckle under the pressure or channel that very tension into something formidable. Taking a deep breath, he began with a personal touch, sharing a story from his time in service. "In the military, we faced immense challenges that often felt insurmountable," he said, his voice steadying as he delved into the narrative. "Similarly, education today presents obstacles that seem daunting. But what if we viewed those obstacles as opportunities? Just like in combat, where every setback is followed by a strategy to overcome it, every student can be supported to find their own resilience. He noticed Emily nodding, her slight smile affirming his approach. A flicker of confidence surged through him, and he continued, weaving in the student stories that represented real battles and triumphs. Each tale illuminated not just struggles, but also the paths towards triumph, echoing the themes of growth and potential that he had so passionately embraced in their preparation. As he articulated their vision, the board members were silent, their expressions a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Jake's heart raced. He confronted his growing self-doubt head-on, like the adversaries he confronted in the field. They were now engaged, not just with the statistics plastered on the slides, but with the very pulse of what education could represent. Then came the inevitable challenge. The head strategist leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. While your personal experiences are compelling, how exactly do you plan to integrate these ideas into our existing framework? We need results, not anecdotes. The question slapped against his confidence, igniting that familiar chain of anxiety in his mind. His instinct was to retreat, to protect his vision. Instead, he leaned in, grounding himself in the knowledge that he had prepared for this moment. Our plan is not just about adding programs. It's about cultivating an environment where personal narratives shape pedagogy. We can implement mentorship that fosters these student journeys while tracking their progress. Stories like the ones I shared will serve as evidence for this model, not just in emotional resonance but in measurable outcomes. The strategist's brow furrowed, clearly taken aback by the specificity of his response. Jake felt the tide shifting. The energy in the room crackled with a new tension. One of the board members, a veteran in education herself, interjected with a softer tone. I see the vision, Jake, but what about scalability? We're a large institution. How will you ensure this approach can resonate across various demographics? Jake welcomed the question as another opportunity to reinforce his commitment. This was a chance to transform their conversation from one of doubt to collaboration. Scalability hinges on flexibility. We'll introduce pilot programs with students from diverse backgrounds, gather data, and refine our approach accordingly. We need to understand the nuances of each environment, shifting our framework as needed to ensure every student's narrative is valid and valuable. He felt the board shifting in their seats, the initial hostility melting into curiosity. Jake's resolve crystallized. He realized he was not just advocating for a program, but for an evolution in how they perceived education as a whole. As the meeting adjourned, Jake was filled with adrenaline and exhaustion. A sense of accomplishment swirled within him, mingling with the worry about the potential follow-up, the definitive answer that could either solidify their vision or see it crumble. Emily caught his eye yet again, admiration shining through. You did it, Jake. You challenged their perceptions and made them engage, she said, her voice invigorating his spirit. The thrill of what lay ahead electrified Jake. He had forged a new identity amidst the turmoil, proving to himself and the board that resilience was not merely a trait of soldiers. It was a catalyst for transformative change. As the board's next steps echoed in his mind, more meetings, deeper scrutiny, Jake felt the horizon stretching before him, filled with the promise of a pivotal decision. Would they accept his vision, capable of wielding the very resilience they sought to inspire? The stakes had never felt higher. He was about to discover if the risks he had taken would finally pay off. Just as he stepped out of the boardroom and the gravity of what lay ahead settled in, his phone buzzed. A message from an unexpected source. Let's talk. I have concerns. The weight of those words hung heavily as he looked up, the path ahead shrouded in uncertainty. What hurdles would he now face, and would they challenge everything he had fought for? Jake stood outside the boardroom, his heart hammering against his chest. The weight of the message rattled in his mind, amplifying his self-doubt. Who could it be? Which of his proponents now threatened what had just begun to solidify? He glanced at Emily, still glowing from the after-effects of the meeting, and hurried down the hall to an empty conference room. Inside, he paced, attempting to regain his focus. The shadows of doubt danced on the walls, but he forced himself to confront them. This was no simple reassessment. It was a critical pivot in his career. He recalled the faces of students whose lives could change, real lives entwined with the fate of this project. As he wrapped his fingers around the edge of the table, he reminded himself of the power of resilience, something he had fought for, both on and off the battlefield. The impending conversation needed to be a tactical maneuver, one requiring threats to be faced head-on, not shied away from. He opened the message again and bit back anxiety with resolve. "Let's talk. I have concerns." With a quick swipe, he dialed the sender, one of the board member's assistants. After the inevitable ringing, a voice broke through, cool and professional. "Hello? Hi, it's Jake Darnell. I received your message. Who is this about?" "It's about Tom Henderson. He's concerned about your last presentation and its implications. He wants to meet, preferably before the next board meeting." His stomach tightened. Tom was known for being pragmatic, his focus razor-sharp when it came to resources and results. This wasn't just a casual chat, it was a potential storm. As you know, Tom cares about measurable outcomes. If he feels there's a misalignment with reality, he's not likely to advocate for your proposal. The assistant continued, her tone almost sympathetic. "Understood. When and where?" After confirming the details, Jake hung up, feeling the weight of expectation settle on his shoulders. This was a chance not only to defend his vision, but to showcase the deeper analytical thinking he had honed over years of military training. He suspected Tom's concerns ran deeper than just metrics and scalability. They touched upon the self-doubt that often lurked beneath the surface of lofty ideals. The day stretched ahead of him as he prepared. He spent hours forming a comprehensive plan, gathering data to reinforce his narrative, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. In every metric he dissected, he infused the stories of students, their battles and emerging triumphs. The blend of qualitative and quantitative data would be his shield, crafting an argument that was irrefutable. As morning transformed into afternoon, Jake felt a growing confidence. He was no longer merely rebutting Tom's skepticism. He was ready to elevate their conversation into a strategic partnership, to leverage the doubts as stepping stones, not stumbling blocks. That evening he sat at his dining table surrounded by papers, data, and diagrams. The night deepened outside, but the glow from his desk lamp fueled an energy within him, a relentless quest for clarity and assurance. He closed his eyes and imagined the meeting. Jake would walk in empowered, presenting an intricate tapestry of insights, proving the viability of his vision. He envisioned the moment he could dissolve Tom's concerns, turning an opponent into a champion of his cause. The narrative would shift. It would transform doubt into a collaborative understanding of what education could evolve into, highlighting the inherent humanity within the statistics. But then, an unsettling thought crept in. What if he couldn't convince Tom? What if everything he worked towards unraveled before him? The stakes felt impossibly high. The clock chimed, snapping him back to the present. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of the resilience etched in his bones. Deep down, he knew this was part of the journey, the confrontation that would further define his leadership. Tomorrow loomed large. He would stand face to face with the person who could either amplify his vision or crush it. With a final glance at the clock, he made his decision. He would enter that meeting prepared to transform doubts into collaboration. As he turned off the light, a question resonated in his mind. Was he ready to embrace not just the challenge ahead, but the potential for something even greater? In the silence of the night, that question echoed back, a harbinger of tensions that had yet to unfold. Jake awoke the next morning, a torrent of thoughts flooding his mind, accompanied by an undercurrent of anxiety. He had envisioned what the meeting might look like, but now, reality loomed ahead, sharper and more intimidating than the mere anticipation of it. Steeling himself, he rose and prepared for the day, each routine action a rehearsal of mental fortitude. As he combed through his notes one last time, he found a certain rhythm in the narrative he had crafted, yet a nagging voice within him began questioning its depths. Had he delved too shallowly into the implications of his project? Was he really addressing Tom's concerns or merely skimming the surface? With resolve, Jake set his sights on his local coffee shop, a sanctuary for clarity and contemplation. The comforting hustle of others sharing ideas and eagerly engaging with one another would provide the backdrop he needed. As he entered the shop, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee seeped into his consciousness, invigorating him. He chose a corner table, unfurled his papers, and prepared to confront this pivotal moment intellectually. With each sip of coffee, he traced the intricate connections of academic achievement to personal growth, noting how interwoven student experiences could support statistical assertions. The more he analyzed, the more he transformed his initial anxiety into a distinct forward momentum, a signal he was beginning to own the narrative. But even in that bustling atmosphere, a weight pressed down upon him. What if Tom didn't see the transformative potential Jake believed was inherent in their mission? What if his analytical data was all for naught? Every conceivable doubt flickered like shadows at the edge of his focus. He pushed these fears aside, manifesting his resolve through rigorous preparation. He straightened his back, adopting a posture of confidence, letting the earlier self-doubts fall away. Through the lens of collaborative dialogue, he began imagining how he could communicate the depth of his students' experiences, weaving their stories into a compelling argument that defied mere statistics. It would be the human elements, personal struggles, perseverance, hope, that would shake even Tom's most rigid skepticism. As his energy fueled the pages before him, he reflected on how he had learned resilience in combat, transforming chaos into tactical advantage. Each challenge on the battlefield required swift adjustments to strategy, much like this one. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, letting the thoughts swirl in his mind, anticipating how he could leverage Tom's numbers-oriented mindset as an ally rather than an adversary. He mustered a strategy, changing the framing of his proposal to emphasize sustainable outcomes, not only the immediate data. Instead of resisting Tom's criticisms, he would invite them, positioning himself as someone genuinely interested in collaboration rather than confrontation. Glimpses of his upbringing as a Marine surfaced, carrying the wisdom he'd gained: discipline, strategy, and the ability to pivot under pressure. These lessons weren't just crafted for survival on the battlefield, but could be harnessed here, within the polished walls of the conference room. They aided in constructing the robust narrative necessary to encapsulate the importance of innovative education. As he rose to leave the coffee shop, renewed vigor pulsed through him. He was ready to enter that boardroom, prepared not only with data and insights, but with a deeper understanding of his own journey and mission. But then he paused at the door, the world outside fading into a blur of uncertainty. It dawned on him that while he had visualized convincing Tom, he hadn't considered how much this conversation could challenge his own beliefs, pushing him further toward a transformation he hadn't anticipated. What if this meeting was not just a defense of his project, but an opportunity to redefine his very perspective on leadership? With a determined heart, Jake stepped into the day, uncertainty trailing behind him like a specter. The moment to confront not just Tom, but the essence of his own aspirations was now at hand. And as he walked toward that imposing building, another thought emerged, haunting and exhilarating. Was he prepared for the revelation that awaited him on the other side of the door? The conference room's door loomed before Jake, a portal to transformation and potential conflict. As he stepped inside, the sterile brightness and polished surfaces struck him as cold and impersonal. His eyes slid toward Tom, who was already seated, flipping through the documents Jake had submitted. The anticipation gripped him tightly. He could feel the power of what was about to unfold. "Good morning, Jake," Tom said, his voice steady, revealing nothing. There was no warmth in the greeting, only the tension of competition. Jake nodded, casting a glance around the room to gauge the atmosphere. Was this an audience ready to listen, or merely a panel poised to critique? With a deep breath, he started presenting, casting aside the earlier buried doubts, focusing instead on the narrative he'd crafted. He began weaving in his students' stories, the hardships they faced, and the triumphs that illustrated the value of the project. The anecdotal evidence danced within the realm of hard data. He saw glimpses of understanding flicker across the faces of some participants. Despite Tom's stoic demeanor, Jake felt momentum building, a subtle shift from skepticism toward acceptance. Yet as he spoke, Jake's mind rapidly processed the reactions. Tom remained unmoved, seizing on discrepancies in his analysis and punctuating his points with a series of critiques. Each questioning statement felt like daggers aimed at Jake's sense of self. The voice of doubt echoed louder, eclipsing his earlier confidence. Are you suggesting that personal narratives outweigh statistical rigor? Tom's words cut through the air, laced with substantial challenge. The room grew heavier with the weight of the question, a pivotal moment that echoed Jake's deepest fears. In that heartbeat, Jake realized that this was not just a clash over data, it was a confrontation of perspectives. He could either retreat to a defensive position or embrace the moment to pivot. Tom, that's precisely the point, he replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. The statistics are powerful, but they lack soul. Our students are not just numbers, they are stories, struggles, and immense potential. He leaned in slightly, sensing the room shift. Each statistic represents a real experience. If we want genuine transformation, we must honor those stories. They enrich our understanding and bring depth to the data we present. Jake's resolve settled in his chest like a protective shield. He could sense a moment of realization wash over him. He wasn't just fighting for his project. He was advocating for something greater. This confrontation was demanding the very essence of his values as a leader and educator. As he spoke, he suddenly recognized a vital truth about himself. He did not need Tom's validation to affirm his mission. With unwavering determination, he continued, inviting feedback instead of shying away from dissent. He posed questions back to Tom, seeking collaboration rather than competition. Tom, what if we work together to create a framework that incorporates both analysis and narrative? How might that redefine our approach and amplify our impact? As the tension hung thick in the air, Jake felt an adrenaline rush. Tom's brows furrowed, and for once, uncertainty flickered across his face. The battlefield had shifted. Jake began to wonder. The hesitance he sensed in Tom could be more than resistance. It could be fear of the unknown, fear of change. What if this confrontation unearthed a rare opportunity for him to not only advocate for his students, but to also elevate Tom's understanding of education? But before he could press further, Tom leveled a composed gaze at him. Let's take a step back, he suggested, creating a palpable tension that filled the room. The balance of data and narrative is delicate. There's more to discuss here. Jake felt a mix of frustration and curiosity. What lay beyond this hard-won opening? Was this truly the beginning of a collaboration, or the moment where Tom would ultimately draw the line? As they prepared to delve deeper into this unexpected dialogue, Jake braced himself. But what he didn't realize was that the conversation about to unfold could redefine not just their project, but also reshape his own identity as a leader, pushing him closer to an understanding of the transformative capabilities of education. Would he emerge from this meeting not just as an advocate for a cause, but as a pioneer for a new way of thinking? As Tom adjusted the stack of papers in front of him, Jake felt the air thicken with anticipation. The room's fluorescent lighting added an insistent brightness that did little to soften the gravity of the moment. This wasn't simply a discussion about methodologies. It was a profound inquiry into the purpose of their work. All right, let's analyze your premise then, Tom began, leaning back in his chair. You propose intertwining personal narratives within quantitative frameworks. But let's scrutinize the feasibility. How do we evaluate subjective experiences without compromising our analytical standards? The question hung ominously, a psychological wall Jake had to climb. Yet it sparked a flicker of exhilaration in him. This was not mere obstruction, it was the catalyst for deeper thought. If he could address Tom's skepticism with clarity, perhaps he could forge an unexpected alliance, a new paradigm rooted in a broader understanding. Feasibility is essential, Tom, Jake replied, his voice steadier now. But subjective experiences can be contextualized through qualitative methods. By applying a narrative approach alongside statistical analysis, we can bring layers of meaning that raw data overlooks. Think of it as enriching the data set. He could see glimpses of interest in Tom's eyes but didn't dare assume victory. Tom's expression shifted slightly, indicating an opening he had not envisioned. Enriching, you say? But at what cost? If we aim to bridge the two, we risk diluting the clarity of our findings. How can we prevent that? Jake paused, recognizing the profound nature of the dialogue they were entering. I understand the concern, and that's a valid point, he said thoughtfully. However, by integrating narratives, we allow those statistics to reach people on a personal level. It's not about diluting clarity, it's about amplifying relatability. When we humanize numbers, we ignite change. This was bigger than the project. He was advocating for a fundamental shift in educational approach, a true fusion of intuition and intellect. As he spoke, Jake felt the intertwining threads of his passion and professionalism tighten around him. Tom remained quiet for a moment, his brow furrowed in contemplation. Behind that stern exterior lurked a desire for growth, perhaps a shared yearning for effectiveness in their work. Jake could sense it. His assertion wasn't just resonating, it was striking a chord of introspection. Let's go deeper into this, Tom finally proposed, a hint of intrigue breaking through. How do we quantitatively measure the success of a narrative approach? What evidence can we leverage for that? Jake's heart raced at this unexpected pivot. A mixed methods approach could be employed, combining surveys that rate personal impact with traditional metrics. We could track changes in student motivation, engagement levels, and even retention rates after implementing stories in our curriculum. That way we present a well-rounded evaluation. Tom's nod was imperceptible, yet significant. The room pulsed with an energy Jake had not anticipated, a collaborative spirit emerging in this tense battleground. The line separating educator from student was fading. They were co-creators in this exploration. As the conversation unfolded, he felt an increasing sense of ownership not only of the project, but of his own evolving narrative. Every challenge was now an invitation to reevaluate not only the framework of their work, but also his leadership path. He was no longer just defending his ideology, he was reshaping the trajectory of their professional identities. But as they pushed forward into deeper analysis, Jake noticed small signs of Tom's habitual skepticism re-emerging. Would he truly embrace this new perspective, or would fear of the unknown breed resistance? Jake's mind raced with the infinite possibilities this collaboration could yield, yet the shadow of doubt loomed like a specter. What if Tom ultimately chose the comfort of convention over the risks of innovation? The moment of truth was arriving silently, but it was unmistakable. All that mattered was to keep pushing, to dig deeper into both data and narrative, until boundaries blurred into a space of revolutionary potential. You know, Jake, Tom began again, steeling himself for the conversation to come. We might just stand on the brink of retilting the educational framework, but the "but" hung in the air, electric with uncertainty. Would Tom be the ally he hoped for, or the obstacle that could derail everything? Jake stood poised at the cusp of transformation, both nervous and invigorated as Tom's voice lingered in the air, punctuating a moment that felt monumental. But, Tom continued, I still need to be convinced of the practical benefits and tangible outcomes of your approach. With his heart pounding, Jake sensed that this was the moment to cement his vision. This isn't just about blending narratives with numbers, Tom. It's about redefining how we see our students, who they are, their potential, and how education can shape their futures. If we truly want to create impactful change, we must engage them meaningfully. Tom's brow furrowed, a sign of contemplation rather than dismissal. Engagement is key, yes. But how do we ensure this translates into measurable success? Our funding depends on results. True change often lies in the soft skills we instill, which does not always show immediate results, Jake countered, recalling his own journey from soldier to advocate. However, by implementing qualitative case studies, we can uncover narratives that highlight both individual growth and group dynamics. For instance, we could document how increased engagement in learning translates into higher test scores or reduced dropout rates over time. Jake leveraged Tom's skepticism, transforming it into an opportunity to solidify their plan. A shared commitment to creating an education system that honored every student's story. Imagine a data report populated not just by figures, but also by the powerful voices of students whose lives have been changed. This will resonate far more with stakeholders than just standard metrics alone. Jake's own evolution mirrored this moment of clarity. The walls that had constricted his purpose began to dissolve as he leaned into his convictions. He was no longer merely reacting to Tom's challenges. He was leading with intent, and conviction. Jake could sense their collaboration shifting into a constructive alliance. Tom remained thoughtful, crossing his arms. It sounds compelling, Jake. Yet I need to see this idea fleshed out in our upcoming proposal. The board will want specifics. With fresh resolve, Jake met Tom's gaze, voice steady yet persuasive. Let's develop a pilot program where we apply these narratives within an established curriculum. Then, we can execute an assessment following storytelling interventions to gather data on student engagement and retention. It's ambitious, but the potential impact could transcend mere statistics. As Tom absorbed this direction, Jake felt a sense of ownership that surged through him. He had shifted from wanting acceptance to advocating for what he believed in fervently. This wasn't just about the project anymore. It was personal. This was about reshaping his identity away from the service and stepping boldly into the realm of education as an influencer, sculptor, and champion. All right, Tom finally said, nodding slowly. If we're going to build this bridge between data and narrative, let's prepare a robust framework for this pilot program. I'm willing to pitch it to the board, but it will take a compelling argument. Let's outline our goals, desired outcomes, and how we'll evaluate success in measurable terms. With Tom's willingness to forge ahead, Jake felt the weight of self-doubt lighten. Here lay the opportunity to not merely advocate for a cause, but to redefine his legacy. It was a testament to the journey he had undertaken, both as a soldier and as a mentor. As they molded their ideas, Jake recognized the profound shift within himself. The anxiety that had gripped him just days ago transformed into a visionary's clarity. He was prepared to confront tomorrow, not with fear, but with equity and resolve. In the weeks that followed, Jake and Tom meticulously crafted the proposal. They intertwined robust narratives with traditional metrics, embedding the voices of the students they aimed to uplift. When Jake finally stood before the board, presenting their joint vision, it was more than just a culmination of their efforts. It was a byproduct of his own evolution. He spoke with authority, no longer the hesitant Marine returning from battle, but a man who had embraced vulnerability as a formidable strength. Education must account for the experiences behind the scenes, the lives transformed, the barriers broken, he asserted, every word echoing with confidence. After the presentation, applause filled the room, a direct contrast to the skepticism he had encountered initially. Tom stood beside him, nodding in mutual acknowledgement of the ground they had covered. It was official. They were approved to launch their pilot program. As he left the meeting, a broad smile spread across his face. Jake Thompson had emerged from the shadows of uncertainty into an era of profound purpose and recognition. He had conquered the internal battles that once confined him, stepping into a space where his past enriched his present, and his advocacy promised a brighter future for countless students. Jake felt Max's familiar presence at his side as he walked out, embodying the loyalty of a companion who had witnessed every step of his journey. "This is it, buddy," he murmured to the dog. "We did it." With renewed clarity, his worthiness blossomed. Jake wasn't just a former Marine, he was a catalyst for change, a guardian of resilience in the realm of education. He had stepped beyond his family's legacy of toil, embracing a new path defined by hope, potential, and inspiring futures. This was his moment of achievement, solid confidence anchored not in expectation, but in a commitment to something greater. You need to subscribe now to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes all the difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative conclusion.